Now in this example, the first thing we need to do is figure out the relationship and set up the equation. So if I determine that the lines intersect outside, remember we're going to use the full times the little part outside. So if I were to do that, the full part for the first one would be this entire part, which is really the sum of these two. So if I were to add 2x plus 32 plus x, I can combine like terms to give me a value of 3x plus 32. So the first part of my equation is the whole thing, which is the 3x plus 32 times the part outside, which is just the x. So this is times x equals, for the second half, the whole line will be a value of these two smaller segments, so the 10 and the 1 added together. So you have 10 plus 1, which gives you a value of 11. So it would be the whole length, which is 11, times the part outside, which is just the 1. Now from here, we're just going to solve like we would a normal equation. So for the top part, we're first going to distribute. So I can distribute the x to the 3x. We get 3x squared, and the x to the 32. So it's plus 32x, which equals 11. Now because we have an x squared that we're not going to be able to get rid of 2, we need to solve to set this equal 0. So I can subtract 11 from both sides. So you get 3x squared plus 32x minus 11 equals 0. And now you need to factor and solve. Now the first method we're going to use to possibly factor and solve is guess and check. So we have 3x squared plus 32x minus 11 equals 0. We know that our factors are going to be the two blanks, and we need to figure out what we're going to fill in. Now because there's something in front of the x squared, it's not just x and x. However, because it's 3x squared, we know it's just going to be 3x. And we need to figure out what goes here. And we need to make it so that if we plugged in the numbers, they would multiply to negative 11 and add, so that if I took the product of this plus whatever this adds to equals 32x. So let's say, for example, that I decided to plug in, if I want to multiply to negative 11, I could have positive 1 and negative 11. So let's say I decide to fill in a negative 11x here and a plus 1 there. If I were to multiply, this is negative 11 times x, this is negative 11x, and the other one would become 3x times 1, which is 3x. So if I check and I multiply, I would have to multiply the negative 11, or add the negative 11x and the 3x. And if we check that, does that equal 32x? No, this would only equal negative 8x. So this would not be an option that would work. So now let's try switching the numbers. So instead, I'm going to erase what I have here. So now instead of doing negative 11 plus 1, let's fill in plus 1 and then minus 11. So if I were to do that, this becomes 1 times x, so it's just x. And over here is 3x times negative 11, which gives you negative 33x. And when you add the x plus the negative 33x, it gives you a value of negative 32x, which is not what we want. So now we have to keep going. So let's say instead of using 1 and negative 11, I use negative 1 and positive 11. So if I erase what I have, and let's say I just decided to change my signs, so I'm going to make this minus 1 plus 11. If I multiply, negative 1 times x gives me negative x, and 3x times 11 gives you 33x. And when you add the negative x and the 33x, will give you 32x. So we know that these are the factors. Now the other method we talked about using to solve a quadratic by factoring is bottoms up. The first thing you do with bottoms up is multiply the value of 3 over to the last number. So it becomes x squared plus 32x minus 33 equals 0. Then we're going to factor like you normally would. So you want to find what two numbers multiply to negative 33 and add to 32. And if we go through and guess and check with those numbers, you're going to end up getting x plus 33 times x minus 1. Now the important thing with bottoms up is once we get to this step, we're not done, because now we have to re-involve the 3. So if I divide both of these by 3, I can simplify the 33 over 3 to become x plus 11, and then the other term is x minus 1/3 as it simplifies, so it stays as a fraction. The last thing that you're going to do is you're going to have to bring whatever is left in the bottom, or the denominator, up in front of the x. So the first term stays as x plus 11, and the other term becomes 3x minus 1. Now whichever method you chose to use, which is completely up to you, you're going to have 3x minus 1 and x plus 11 as your factors. Now to finish solving, we have to set them both equal 0. So you could say 3x minus 1 equals 0. So 3x equals 1, which gives you x equals 1/3. For the other equation, if I have x plus 11 equals 0, that's going to give me x equals negative 11. Now if I check my answers, if I plug in 1/3, in every case it gives me a positive answer. So this is one of my choices. However, if I plug in negative 11, it would give me a negative value of x, so it would be a negative side length, which is impossible, so negative 11 is not a solution. So the only solution to this problem is x equals 1/3.